Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Monday, 9th June 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. The United States and China are currently engaged in high-level trade negotiations in London, seeking to de-escalate trade and technology tension. These talks aim to resolve ongoing disputes, with the US considering easing tech export restrictions in exchange for China increasing rare earth mineral export. The US is pursuing a handshake on rare earths during the talks. China's rare earth element exports have seen a significant drop, potentially providing leverage in the negotiations. Both US and Chinese officials recently exchanged criticisms at a Shanghai event over trade. The US may exhaust its debt ceiling measures by mid-August, according to the CBO, and has found no evidence of currency manipulation in 2024. Wall Street and Main Street are advocating for a foreign tax rethink in the US budget bill. The US insurance composite experienced a 0.7% slide last week. Furthermore, the US is accusing a Russian national of laundering millions and aiding Moscow in acquiring sensitive technology and anticipates continued retaliation from Russia for Operation Spiderweb. Investors believe Latin America is poised to benefit from US market shifts. Turning to market reactions, global stock markets are showing mixed performance as investors await the results of the US-China trade talks. Asian markets, particularly Hong Kong, are generally optimistic, with Hong Kong stocks rising on hopes of successful talks. European equities are easing amid the ongoing negotiations. Indian stock markets opened higher but remain cautious. Wall Street is holding steady, with slight gains in the S&P 500 and minor dips in the Dow Jones. The dollar's performance and geopolitical tensions are expected to cause volatility in gold and silver prices. London copper prices are easing slightly as attention remains focused on the US-China trade talks. In Australia, consumer sentiment is showing cautious pessimism. The country is also navigating a diplomatic dispute concerning a Chinese-owned port. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC, is piloting a faster IPO process to address the decade low in listings, aiming to reduce the process by a week and attract more listings by 2025. Virgin Australia has confirmed its plans for an Australian IPO in June 2025. Solus Minerals is seeking tax-5 delisting and Australian re-domiciliation. APRA is mandating that super funds enhance their cybersecurity measures. Rio Tinto is working to save an aluminum smelter from closure. Foschini Group's Australia sales experienced a further decline in the second half of the year. Meanwhile, China's Huawei Technologies founder Ren Zhengfei has stated that their Ascend chips lag us chips by a generation, but comparable performance can be achieved through other methods. Hong Kong's economy is facing challenges due to its synchronization with mainland China and its reliance on US monetary policy. Across the globe, in the United Kingdom, London's stock market experienced a £10 billion loss as a major firm plans to relocate to the US. Fresh challenges for London include as buyers mounting a £5 billion raid on the stock market. The FTSE 100 is dipping as markets monitor the US-China talks. Elsewhere, the Bank of Spain has lowered its GDP forecast, citing US tariffs as a contributing factor. Finally, in the United Arab Emirates, UAE shares ended higher, as investors awaited the outcome of the US-China trade talks. China's export figures showed a 4.8% increase in May, though shipments to the US declined sharply by over 34%, the steepest drop in over 5 years. As consumer prices slump due to weak demand, concerns about deflation are rising. China is tapping into a $1.50 trillion fund to bolster housing market support. China is engaging with Western auto giants to address rare earth shortages. Vincent Medical Holdings is expanding its manufacturing in China, focusing on automation and digitalization. Li Tong, the China head of content quality at ByteDance, has departed. Morgan Stanley reports that global investors are currently underweight on China stocks. The nation's solar industry is convening amid deepening demand concerns. China's stock market is experiencing a surge. China's $1.10 trillion asset manager is emerging as a key player on the national team. Eve Energy and CJ Jewelry are planning to list in Hong Kong. China's auto and tech giants pose a significant threat to Tesla's self-driving future. A report indicates that a secret crypto pipeline runs through Hong Kong. Turning to the United States, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent attended renewed US-China trade talks in London. He Tianying, who has ties to the Chinese Communist Party, received VIP treatment at a Trump crypto dinner. President Donald Trump stated that China is not easy as trade talks are set to resume. Luckin Coffee is planning to expand into the U.S. with a branch in Lower Manhattan. Renewed US-China trade talks occurred in London. These talks aim to resolve tariff and supply chain disputes. A preliminary deal struck between the U.S. and China in Switzerland resulted in both sides dropping a majority of their respective tariffs. Markets are closely monitoring the developments, with U.S. stocks ending mostly higher. J.P. Morgan analysts suggest the S&P 500 could reach a new peak if the talks progress positively. The S&P 500 is nearing its February highs, contingent on progress in these discussions. European markets are expected to follow global markets higher as the talks continue. Asia-Pacific markets are also climbing. Oil prices dipped due to weak China data, but hopes for a U.S.-China trade deal are providing support. Globally, foreign financial institutions are increasingly optimistic about China's capital market. Asia stocks are rising as investors digest China data and await the outcomes of trade discussions between Beijing and Washington. India's stock market is showing strong gains, fueled by optimistic trade forecasts and support from the Reserve Bank of India, RBI. Gift Nifty trends point to a positive start for the Indian benchmark index, with the Nifty 50 achieving its highest close of 2025. This bullish trend is reinforced by a surge in Indian bonds, drawing investors to short-term bonds due to ample liquidity and the RBI's cash infusions, although the RBI plans to halt daily fund injections after a shift in its policy. The CEO of the National Stock Exchange, NSE, noted a six-fold increase in India's market capitalization over the last 11 years, attributing it to confidence in reforms and significant infrastructure development under Prime Minister Modi. Foreign diplomats were briefed on India's financial infrastructure and market reforms. The NSE Knights has proposed cross-listings with the Sri Lanka bourse, and DFCC Bank became the first foreign corporate to list a bond on India's NSE International Exchange. Although Indian shares experienced a slight downturn due to financial stocks. In other news, China is expanding its manufacturing operations in India to bolster its global supply chains, responding to the U.S.-China trade tension. Swiss cosmetics brand Cellcosmet is preparing to launch in the Indian market, while India is increasingly relying on domestic capital to finance its growth, and India's largest milk producer is working to combat protein deficiency. The Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, is investigating Jane Street's derivative trades over a 3-year period. On the international stage, India is enhancing economic partnerships with Europe, as highlighted by Piyush Goyal's visits to Switzerland and Sweden. Saudi Arabia has temporarily stopped issuing blockwork visas for 14 countries, including India, potentially impacting travelers. Shubhanshu Shukla is poised to become the first Indian in space in 41 years. Aboard a SpaceX rocket, Russia's intelligence services face accusations of collecting data from WeChat, while a crypto CEO is under Justice Department scrutiny for allegedly laundering $500 million linked to sanctioned Russian banks and having ties to Russian intelligence. Germany's intelligence chief cautioned that Russia might employ little green men tactics to test NATO's resolve. Air defenses in Russia reportedly intercepted drones approaching Moscow. Economists predict that Russia's national welfare fund could be exhausted by 2026. Despite challenges, Russia has expressed its readiness for a prisoner exchange with Ukraine and has completed a prisoner of war exchange with Ukraine involving younger prisoners. The Kremlin insists that Russia will not cease its war in Ukraine unless NATO withdraws from the Baltic states. Russia's strategy to amplify its influence in Africa includes sensitive security collaborations. Train service between Moscow and Pyongyang, North Korea, is set to resume. The EU is considering adding Russia to its list of countries with deficient money laundering controls. Russia and Iran have reached an agreement for the construction of 8 nuclear power plants, including the Bushehr facility. On June 9, 2025, the MOEX index of the Russian stock market and financial sector share prices were closely monitored. The key to Russia's potential defeat lies in its economy. Turning to Ukraine, Russia launched a large-scale drone attack on Kyiv and Odessa, resulting in 1 death. Despite ongoing issues, the Kremlin has stated that Russia is still ready for a prisoner exchange with Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine have completed a prisoner of war exchange involving younger prisoners. United States President Donald Trump authorized the deployment of 2,000 additional National Guard troops to Los Angeles. This deployment comes in response to protests where at least 5 Waymo robotaxis were vandalized and set on fire. Anti-immigration and customs enforcement graffiti was found on the vehicles. Waymo indicated the vehicles were caught amidst the protest. California Governor Gavin Newsom criticized Trump's actions. Newsom described the president as unhinged and questioned the legality of federalizing the National Guard troops. Turning to Ireland, the nation's public services reform and digitalization minister is slated to speak at LAB 2025. Saudi Arabia's economy showed strong growth in the first quarter, with GDP rising by 3.4%, primarily fueled by the non-oil sector. Commercial bank profits in the kingdom also experienced a substantial increase, surging by 16% in April to exceed $2 before zakat and tax. Despite an ongoing IPO boom, Saudi Arabia faces several emerging challenges in this area. Jindal Saw's share price saw a 10% increase after a $118 investment in Middle East expansion, including projects in both the UAE and Saudi Arabia. The National Shipping Company of Saudi Arabia has delivered impressive investment returns, marking a 123% gain over 3 years. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman received a G7 invitation from Canada. Saudi Arabia has expressed its commitment to supporting the stability of the Syrian economy. New regulations have been implemented concerning livestock sales within the country. FIFA entered into another Saudi deal with the Sovereign Wealth Fund PIF backing the Club World Cup. Wipro inaugurated its Riyadh headquarters and formed a partnership with PMU to cultivate Saudi tech talent. The Saudi Arabia essential oils market is projected to experience considerable growth between 2022 and 2030, driven by demand for natural ingredients and the expanding spa industry. Akam Capital is bolstering its investment banking efforts in response to increased deal activity in both Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are leading the GCC smart TV market through digital innovation and generating high revenue. The Saudi carrier Flynas is planning to expand its operations across 4 hubs. European Union markets are seeing proposed regulatory changes, with Norges Bank Investment Management advocating for a unified e-market regulator to foster greater business dynamism. Fluctuations in European market performance are being driven by ongoing US-China trade discussions influencing investor sentiment. Despite opening higher, markets generally closed lower, then stabilized as trade talk developments unfolded, while IJOS stock saw gains after a European distribution agreement. The United Kingdom was the first stop for NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang's European tour, marked by his well-received appearance at London Tech Week. The UK also played host to discussions regarding US-China trade relations. Hong Kong is working to strengthen its ties with European businesses, with support being offered to startups participating in the Viva Tech show held in Paris. Germany is experiencing a surge in investment interest, highlighted by Apollo's potential $100 billion commitment, focusing on key sectors as private capital shifts away from the US due to instability. Vantage Data Centers has successfully obtained €720 million through an asset-backed securitization ABS deal, representing a milestone as the first euro-denominated ABS secured by German data center asset. Autodoc, supported by Apollo, is also gearing up for an IPO in Germany, fueled by its rapid expansion. Shifting to energy, Germany's CIF is poised to unveil a decade-long gas agreement with Azerbaijan, strengthening its energy supply. Contrasting this economic activity, German stocks saw a decline amidst the backdrop of trade discussions between the US and China, reflecting market sensitivity to global economic dynamics. Asian stock markets are currently experiencing an upswing, fueled by encouraging signs from the trade discussions between the United States and China. Speaking of the United States and China, negotiators are actively engaged in trade talks in London, with market sentiment closely tied to the perceived progress of these discussions. India's rupee is showing reduced volatility, tracking a similar trend among other Asian currencies. Several Indian corporations, notably Asian Paints, Tata Investment, Indian Bank, and Johnson Controls Hitachi, are trading ex-dividend. Additionally, Vesuvius India will be trading ex-date for a stock split. Investment analyses are spotlighting Asian growth companies that have substantial ownership by insiders. South Korea is grappling with a credit crunch that threatens funding for higher-risk ventures. This has prompted the South Korean president to advocate for the swift formulation of a supplementary budget. Bolstered by the prospect of upcoming tariff talks between Washington and Seoul, the South Korean won is gaining strength, approaching an 8-month peak. Meanwhile, the London Stock Exchange LSE is accelerating its plans for an IPO on Korea's Kosdaq exchange, focusing on semiconductor cleaning equipment. South Korean equities have enjoyed a surge, driven by optimism related to post-election developments and the resumption of US-China trade discussions. The potential implementation of local currency vouchers to boost domestic consumption is under consideration. Kaya's announcement of a one-peg stablecoin launch is contributing to a rally in South Korean payment-related stocks. Furthermore, activist retail investors are increasingly holding underperforming corporations accountable. Lee Jae-myung's recent victory has triggered a rise in South Korean stock values. An agri-food trade delegation, headed by Hayden, is focusing on both Korea and Japan, with Irish agri-food executives pinpointing Korea as a vital growth market. Global specialists are gathering in Korea for an IOSCO C4SG meeting centered on the fight against unfair market practices. South Africa's rand saw volatility, initially rising on US-China trade talks which boosted bond trading, but later declining after positive US-jobs figures. A tax loophole closure affecting Shine is starting to impact South African retailers. APAS is an enabling device financing for a major U.S. tech company through a South African retail partnership. The Fari lodges are increasingly utilizing solar power for sustainability. Chery has launched a Moda and Jayco hybrid electric SUVs in South Africa. An electric vehicle awareness campaign features a 3 km journey from Johannesburg to Simala hill climb. Tragically, a light plane crashed within South Africa, resulting in 3 deaths. Switzerland is navigating the complexities of UBS's international strategies while considering new stricter capital requirements proposed by the government. These discussions come in the wake of recent financial uncertainties in the Swiss banking sector. Meanwhile, India is actively strengthening its trade relationship with Switzerland. Indian Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is visiting Switzerland and Sweden to boost trade and investment. Goyal will meet with prominent business figures from both countries and Indian delegates to identify fresh trade and investment opportunities. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has pledged to meet NATO's military spending targets by early next year, indicating a move towards greater self-reliance in defense and less dependence on the United States. Simultaneously, Canada's stock market faced headwinds as the S&P TSX Composite Index closed down by 0.2%. In Canada's mining sector, Allied Gold is currently assessing various power supply options for its Sadiola mine. Elsewhere, the Motley Fool Canada published guidance on constructing a $10,000 investment portfolio, while Simply Wall.Dotson identified potentially undervalued investment prospects to monitor in Canada as of June 25, providing financial strategies for navigating the upcoming market cycle. Japan's economy experienced a less severe contraction than initially estimated, with Q1 GDP revised to an annualized real 0.2% decrease. In economic activity, Japanese investors sold off a significant amount of German bonds in April, the most since 2014. The Nikkei 225 climbed 0.88%, boosted by tech sector performance and Japanese government bond support. On the one, Metaplanet, a Bitcoin-linked stock, saw a 20% increase, exceeding McDonald's Japan in market value. Politically, Shigeru Ishiba is advocating for a 50% pay increase by 2040 as part of his election campaign. Japan's pension funds, overseeing $400 billion, are recruiting their initial chief investment officers. Adding to investment trends, a Japanese hotel group plans to allocate $5 billion to Bitcoin. United Kingdom finds itself in a Goldilocks moment, according to NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, who signaled NVIDIA's intentions to invest. At the same time, Moscow has accused Britain of direct complicity in alleged Ukrainian terrorist actions targeting Russia. Russia's conflict with Ukraine remains intense, marked by escalating attacks, particularly around Kharkiv. Despite the ongoing hostilities, prisoner exchanges have taken place between the two nations, with the initial phase successfully concluded. The Kremlin has also specifically accused Britain of being fully involved in Ukraine's terrorist attacks against Russia. Iraq faces growing internal strife as disagreements intensify between the central government in Baghdad and the northern Kurdish region over the distribution of oil revenues. Turning to Azerbaijan, the nation is actively promoting Karabakh and East Zangezur as attractive tourism destinations for South Korean visitors, an effort highlighted at a recent Seoul event. Further bolstering its international economic ties, Azerbaijan has proposed creating a joint investment fund with Saudi Arabia. In the United States, multiple states are pursuing legal action to block the sale of personal genetic data by 23andMe, citing concerns over the transfer of sensitive biological samples, DNA data, health traits, and medical records without explicit consent. In business news, Huawei has agreed to a £1 sterling 80 billion acquisition by America's Qualcomm. Serbia is witnessing challenges with a Trump-branded hotel complex project in Belgrade, backed by Jared Kushner, including resignations and a criminal charge stemming from preservationist concerns at the bombed-out building site. Syria is taking steps to reintegrate into the global financial system, with the central bank planning to unify its currency and rejoin the SWIFT global payment network. Syria has now been welcomed back to the SWIFT banking system. Hungary is attracting increasing numbers of Chinese manufacturing companies, supported by legal expertise such as that offered by Yankee Law Firm's Budapest office. Singapore sees potential growth in its stock market, with a corporate financier anticipating the listing of at least 4 Singaporean companies on the SGX within the next 18 months. Brazil is seeking the extradition of a congresswoman who has been sentenced to a 10-year prison term. Mexico's retail sector is poised for expansion, with Coppel planning to invest $4.20 in its e-commerce operations and the opening of new retail locations. France remains politically dynamic, as President Emmanuel Macron has not ruled out the possibility of calling snap elections again. Norway's financial sector is making its voice heard, with the country's oil fund urging immediate reform of European capital markets. Malaysia's stock market experienced a turbulent opening, reflecting investor apprehension surrounding ongoing US-China trade negotiations. South Africa is grappling with local economic issues as a legal dispute unfolds between the city of Johannesburg and local traders. Jordan's financial stability remains consistent, with foreign exchange reserves holding steady at $22.76 billion in May. Taiwan is actively engaging with Guatemala, offering technological assistance amidst increasing diplomatic pressure from China on the Central American nation. New Zealand's monetary policy is under scrutiny, with Willis advocating for the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, RBNZ, to consider a summer rate decision in its monetary policy consideration. South Korea was the site of a tourism promotion, with Brunei tourism being showcased prominently at a tourism booth. Indonesia's corporate landscape is the subject of speculation, with Grab denying reports of deal negotiations with Indonesia's Goto. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.